hands as opposed to on the floor itself. All right, who's ever thought about what it might be like if you could be like doing a little dance on the North or South Pole? You ever have one of those? I wish I was there right now. Who's ever thought about what it might be like 1,000 years from now if you were here? In other words, the point is that we have these amazing minds that are capable literally of pondering infinity, but those minds, as far as we can tell, Descartes' rantings notwithstanding, are permanently embedded in this corporal body that's destined to die. So the first thing that Kierkegaard said is that one of the problems that is of necessity engendered by the awareness that you exist is the consequent recognition of your mortality. But what Becker points out is that it's not only that that's problematic to human beings, because it would be bad enough if all that you had to be concerned about is the fact that you will someday die. But for Becker, that concern about dying becomes magnified by the fact that you're also concurrently aware of the fact that death can occur at any time for reasons that no one could ever anticipate or control. And of course, some of the novelists that some of us admire, a lot of books are written just about this idea. I call it the notion of tragedy, just that bad things happen all the time to good people for reasons that we could never anticipate or control. And again, silly perhaps, but you each know the next time you get on an airplane and it appears to be flying lower than it ought that you might be next to be vaporized against the side of a building. And you know the next time you open a card and that white powder falls out that it might not be talcum powder. And you know the next time you get a headache, it might be a migraine. Then again, it may be a baseball-sized inoperable tumor, a harbinger of your last 6 weeks on Earth. The problem is that you know all of those things. Well, things are looking pretty ugly, but it gets even worse because Becker points out it's not only the fact that you're going to die, it's not only the fact that you know that death can occur at any time for reasons that can't be anticipated or controlled. Now what he does is, following Freud, he says, you know what? There's another problem, and that's that you're an animal. You're a breathing piece of defecating, urinating, vomiting, expectorating, perspiring, menstruating, ejaculating, exfoliating, somebody stop me, postnasal dripping. You're a piece of meat, and you're no more significant or enduring than a cucumber or a cockroach, and you know those things. Well, Becker's point is that the ongoing awareness of the reality of the human condition, that you are mortal, that you are vulnerable, that you're a cold cut with an attitude, spam with a plan, without the can, a talking sausage, does not sit well with the average human being. And that, in fact, we would literally be paralyzed with abject terror if that's all we thought about. Think about that for a moment. Well, maybe don't think about that. But the point is, if that's all you thought about, I'm going to die, I could walk outside and get stricken by a meteor, meet with a beat, you would not be sitting here with any modicum of psychological equanimity. You would be a quivering blob of biological protoplasm cowering under the table, groping for a Valium the size of a Buick. But you're not. And so now the question is, that's a Woody Allen thing, by the way. I'd love to claim credit for that joke. What movie is that from? Jeff, do you know that one? I don't know. Anyway, Woody Allen film. But point is, but we're not. We're all sitting here more or less still composed. Few people are looking a little shaky, but you'll be all right. We have snacks. And so now the question becomes, how is it that human beings have, from an evolutionary point of view, responded to the interesting existential dilemma engendered by the awareness of death that is in turn a product of our vast intelligence? What Becker hypothesizes, using the ideas primarily of Otto Rank and another guy named Norman Brown, is that human beings solve the problem of death using the same cognitive capabilities that engendered it in the first place, and that's our vast ability to think abstractly and symbolically through the construction and maintenance of what we would call culture. Now, Becker defines culture as humanly constructed beliefs about the nature of reality that are shared by people in groups in order to minimize the anxiety engendered by the uniquely human awareness of death. Now, we're going to hear a lot more about some of these notions tomorrow, and so let me just preview this idea by suggesting that for Becker, culture reduces anxiety with respect to death in two ways, which he refers to as lending meaning and conferring significance, respectively. So the first thing that Becker says is that what cultures do, and there's a whole lot of different ways of doing this, and he can speak with authority as an anthropologist, is to provide their constituents with answers to universal cosmological questions about the nature of life. Where do I come from? What do I do when I'm here? What will happen to me when I'm no longer around? There is a wide variety of different cultural constructions, both past and present, but what they all share in common is they offer an account of the origin of the universe. They offer a prescription for how one ought to behave while you're here. They offer an explanation for what happens to you when you die. Wait a minute, I've got to take a time out. When you die, and they offer some hope of immortality to people who behave in appropriate ways, either symbolically or literally. In a book called The Birth and Death of Meaning, Becker talked about both symbolic and literal immortality. He said, look, symbolically, and here he's just following the ideas that Plato originated a while ago. I can't even say with authority how long ago that was. But Plato said, look, that's one of the reasons why people like to do big stuff, like build pyramids and skyscrapers. It's one of the reasons why we want to amass big fortunes. It's one of the reasons why we want to write that famous book. It's even one of the reasons why we want to have kids. We know on the one hand that we may not be here forever, but we're comforted nevertheless by the prospect that a physical manifestation of ourselves remains nevertheless. Again, to borrow from Woody Allen, he said, you know what, I like my immortality to be literal. I don't want to be known forever by my work. I want to be known by living forever. In other words, if push comes to shove, the average person would prefer literal immortality to symbolic immortality, and that's the primary function of organized religion, with one or two important exceptions, and I think even these are explicable in the context of the theory that I now advance. Every organized religion offers some hope of immortality to individuals who behave on earth in a way that will then get them to everlasting life in the future. So most of us are familiar with the Christian afterlife. Some of us are familiar with the Hindu notion that you keep coming back until you get it right. And then you get to exist in perpetuity in some kind of ephemeral mist, and I don't mean any of this cynically. I should point, all cultures, as far as we know, offer some hope of literal immortality to their constituents. And so one point that Becker makes is that culture provides us with a sense that we live in a meaningful universe. He insists, however, that while the belief that life has meaning is necessary, it's not in and of itself sufficient for psychological equanimity. In addition to the idea that the world is meaningful, he claims that each of us needs to believe that we as individuals serve a valuable and significant role in that meaningful universe. How many of you, when you were little, long before you maybe are the way you are today, ever dreamed of doing something special or important? Whoever laid around in your bed at night and said, yo, I'm going to win a Nobel Prize, or I'm going to win an Olympic medal, or I'm going to discover a cure for cancer. I used to do all those things at once. I'd be like, I'll win a gold medal, and I'll get a Nobel Prize, and then I'll write a book on the plane over to get it, and so on. But maybe that's just me. Some of you all may be more content for a more modest dose of heroism. The point that Becker makes is that that's not the raving lunacy of a narcissist. It may be in my case, but rather the normal yearning of the human animal. We each want to feel like we serve a valuable and significant role in the universe. And the way that culture allows us to pull this off is by the provision of social roles with associated prescriptions of acceptable conduct, the satisfaction of which allows you to perceive yourself as a person of value in a world of meaning. And if you're lucky enough to feel that way, in his language, you have self-esteem. So for Becker, self-esteem is the dominant motive of the human animal. It consists of the belief that you are a person of value in a world of meaning. It is the psychological mechanism by which culture exerts its anxiety-reducing, death-denying influence.